Good morning, everyone. This is a recording from round 2 of the Crazyhouse World Championship on lichess.org. So I'm Mugwort. I'm taking on VariantsOnly, also known as from the Netherlands. So this is the first game that's just started. So I'm just going to be providing some commentary on the match that happened this morning. So this move, bishop e6, I maybe have seen once before a long time ago, but I guess if it was Bughouse, I would immediately put the pawn on f5. And if knight takes c3, then I'd take the bishop on e6, take on f7 with check, ask my partner for lots of diagonals. Probably good in Crazyhouse too, but I decided to play a little bit safer and just trade off the pieces, put the knight on e3, kick the queen, maybe put a bishop on a4 or a pawn on d5, something like this. So I don't have any real targets. If knight at f4, g2 is already covered. Perhaps got to watch out for pawn at d4 followed by knight at f4, something like this. But I'm trying to get in with the first attack with the pawn or the bishop next after my opponent moves the queen back. Alright, so bishop at a4 coming next. Okay, not much choice here. Got to trade on c6. Very natural move to drop on e5. So there's a few targets here. Pawn on c6 is unprotected. The f7 square is a little bit sensitive, and also the d7 square. So I'm intending either knight takes c6, or if he defends it, perhaps pawn to d4, kick away the knight, drop a pawn on d7. It's a bit hard for black to cover all these weak squares. Bishop on d5. Okay, so I guess d4. Most obvious move. Alright, so I'm hoping that knight will move away from d7 so I can stick a pawn straight there. Otherwise he's going to have to counterattack one of my pieces. Okay, pawn f6. Now, I'm taking my time here because there's quite a lot of options which way to trade pieces. I just want to decide on the most favorable way to trade. There's knight takes f7, there's pawn at d7, there's knight takes bishop, pawn takes knight, knight takes c6. There's already 5 options to consider. So I decided not to move the knight from e5 because it's already got backup from the knight on f3. So that leaves mainly considering either pawn takes d takes c5 or knight takes bishop. So I'm going to go with knight takes bishop, expecting queen takes back. Yeah, just considering the consequences of pawn takes c5 followed by a queen exchange. My king will end up on d1, but if ever he drives my king to e2, I already have the knight drops covered on d4 and f4, so doesn't seem to be anything to worry about at the moment. Yeah, and he can't afford to take back the knight on e5 because pawn at d7 is just too strong. Right, so I mean pawn at d7 is the obvious move. Oh, what's this? He's resigned. Yeah, I guess he's expecting pawn at d7. I was considering knight at d6 check, but yeah, pawn at d7, just take the rook. I think I'm up plenty of material, so resigning maybe a bit early, but fair enough. Okay, on to game 2. He's played this early rook lift, and I've declined to take it, which is... I don't know whether it's good or bad, but I guess it can't be bad controlling the center with the pawns. Yeah, I've got an important decision here. Do I want to push e4 now? Do I want to play bishop at h5? I could always play a safe move like queen to e7. It's just... yeah, I mean, how do I develop the bishop on f8 in that case? Or bishop at d6? Maybe looks a little bit passive. So decided on bishop at h5. Of course, intending e4 next turn, but... yeah, this next move, rook g5, surprised me a little bit. Because... I guess he's hoping I'll defend the pawn on e5, and then he's going to sack the rook on h5, follow up with knight to e5, so that discovers an attack with the queen on h5, and also threatens, you know, c6 and f7, that kind of stuff. So I'm having a think, should I defend e5? Should I push the pawn to e4, allow this sack on h5? Should I trade the bishop, allow the check on e5? Yeah, and again, there's a bailout option. Queen to e7 looks like a safe move. Yeah, I'm not sure about this decision. I don't think it was a good one, to be honest. Yeah, I'm trying to see a few moves ahead and intending rook takes, bishop takes, queen f3, then bishop g4, but then I realized here that it's actually a very bad decision because, well, firstly I looked at pawn at d7 check. That's a bit annoying, but queen takes bishop is actually much stronger than pawn at d7, and this is deflecting 2 pieces away from d7, and now what do I do? I'm going to think for a long time on this move because I have, what, 1, 2, 3 legal moves, and they all look pretty bad. So king f8 is the first move, but then he's going to follow up queen at c8, rook at d8, blocking, probably queen takes a8, rook takes a8, rook back on c8. And then I probably have to go queen back on d8. He can repeat rook takes a8 if he wants to draw. He's probably got better than that though. Yeah, I really didn't like the look of king f8. King to d8 is what I'm considering also, but then it just gives him a free knight drop on b7, and he's going to play bishop at f5 anyway, so... yeah, I mean, that only leaves king takes pawn. It's not a very attractive option because he's going to play bishop at f5, get rid of the knight on g4, or stick a knight back on e5 at check. Yeah, I really can't avoid it, so obviously things have gone wrong a bit earlier on. And spending, you know, a minute and a half on this move is probably not the smartest thing, but yeah, I can't take it back to before the bad decision to allow rook e5. So, all right, just got to take the pawn and live with the consequences. So bishop at f5. Probably should drop the pawn on e6, but I played this king back because he doesn't have a pawn in hand to drop on d7 with check. Dropping a bishop on d7 doesn't really help him that much. Yeah, and probably knight at e5 would be the best move, just a centralizing move, gain a tempo. What else was I considering? Rook at d8. Yeah, this is probably not the best use of a rook. Do I really need 2 rooks on the back row? Maybe not. Probably he should go knight at f5 or knight at h5. Yeah, so there's some big weaknesses in the position already. Or everywhere. g7, e7, d7, c6. Okay, good move. Got to drop the queen on g5. I guess he's just going to save the bishop. Drop another one on, maybe on d7. We check. 9 seconds left here, but because of the increment, yeah, I'm more worried about the position than the clock. I just can't afford to drop any more free pieces. Yeah, knight f3, good move. Not sure whether to go to h6 or g6, but it seems like I'm on a relatively safe square at the moment. Very good move, knight c3, because it will stop counterattacks on e2 and d1 later on. Probably wasn't such a good idea to drive his knight to a better square, e5. And he should play knight takes f7 now, followed by dropping on e6. So I can't take the knight on f7, I get mated. And he's going to pick up lots of free material if he went knight takes f7. So here I'm not too unhappy with. So I decide to distract the bishop from g4. It gives me a little bit more access to the squares f3, e2 and so on. Drop a knight on. Now I've got to watch that bishop moving back because that clears the square d7 for a knight, which I'm occupying now with the bishop. I could have just taken the knight on c6. I didn't even see this until too late. So queen takes c6 would have been the best move there. I mean, I'm offering the bishop on d7. It's a tempting offer, but can he allow knight takes g2 check? He probably can, but it does look a little bit scary. So he's thinking a while here. Knight takes d5. All right, so now I'm going to take on c6. Expecting knight takes e7, and now bishop takes bishop. All right, so very dangerous to allow a knight takes g2 check. In fact, he can't really do this because he's mated by force. It's about mate in 5 or something, so move the knight. I could just play knight takes e3 followed by knight c2 mate, or knight at e2 mate, but this is good enough also. So he can't block. I'm just taking on g2, and now it's mate in 2. So yeah, the final mistake was knight takes queen on c6, but it was already, I think the wheels started to fall off. So yeah, I was lucky to get away with that because knight takes f7 at one moment was completely crushing, overwhelming, I would say. All right, so let's get on to game 3. He's on the rook left again. This time I will take, and I'm looking to drop the rook somewhere on his back row, maybe a8 or maybe close to a8. But okay, castle first. I'm pretty happy with this. And I want to start hacking away at the light squares with a move like d5. So d5, I'm already just planning to take on e6 and open up one of the f7 squares or the d file. I'll just exchange the queens. I'm pretty happy with that. My king is very safe. And trading off the f8 bishop doesn't really help him in defense. Maybe a move like bishop at h5 would have been a bit safer. Yeah, cover the f7 square, make a pin. A bit hard to drive the bishop away. So I thought he might go for this knight c5, just to activate the knight, which is a bit offside on a6. And I had the idea to put the bishop on d4, so that threatens g7. Also, I don't have to bother defending the pawn on e4, which is a bit of a burden to defend. Yeah, I mean, rook e1 was possible, but I'd rather go for the attack immediately. So the other idea, of course, is to trade the knight on c5, because that removes one of the defenders on e6. And just try and crash through with brute force. And already it's very hard for black to find a good move here. I mean, maybe castling is his best move, or bishop at g6, bishop at h5. Just, again, supporting the square. But I have lots of options here. There's even just throwing away the pawn to e7, followed by knight at f5. Looks very dangerous. All right, so now I'm just going for it. Knight e5 to follow. Basically, whether he takes it or not, I could probably pre-move knight e5, knight to e5 here. So here there's multiple threats after knight comes to e5, such as knight at c6, trapping the queen, or knight at g6, I'm sure is also possible. Yeah, it's very hard to guard all these squares. Maybe lost already. I was expecting some sort of counterattack, maybe bishop at h5, but alright, this gives me the c6 square for free, and that is game over, pretty much. He's got to give the queen. Alright, resigning is perfectly reasonable there. Okay, that's 3 games done. black again for the second time. Okay, different opening. Knight to f3. I have nothing prepared, so knight f6. Alright, gonna copy him. I could play d5, but decide to go a little bit more conservative with d6. Bring the bishop out early. Does stop him getting a grip over the e5 square with the knight. So I was considering even pawn c6 is it's a bit too risque. Maybe pawn e6, pawn e5. Bishop takes knight. There's lots of options. I decided to go with pawn to h6. Expecting the bishop to back off somewhere. I was considering following up with g5, bishop g7. But no, he takes. I mean, e takes looks reasonably solid. Knight takes also seems pretty good. Okay, so we get another one of these positions where I have a choice to open the d file. It's happened a number of times. So yeah, don't really see any drawbacks with opening the d file here. My queen's protected. Also important to notice the square d7 is well protected, so he can't just drop a pawn there and start chasing the king. He's got the square d2 reasonably well covered. I could take bishop takes f3 first, followed by a drop on d2. That seemed pretty reasonable, but yeah, I decided to trade off a couple of knights. Yeah, just remove one of the defenders on d2. I thought at some moment he might throw in bishop e5 check, and I was a little bit concerned, how am I going to block? And I suppose here the safer option is e takes f6, so I have a pawn in hand to block, and that helps to cover the black king. This is a slightly more risky option. And bishop b5 check. I guess the danger is it does allow f takes g2, opening up multiple attacks. So I suppose, yeah, he's going to take on f3 at some point. Alright, so now options. Drop on d2 with check. It does give up a whole piece. Bishop takes f3, followed by a drop on d2. Now that does give him pawn at d7, so I really can't afford to move the bishop away from d7. E takes f6, looks perfectly okay. Yeah, so I'm leaning towards e takes f6 here. Always good to have a pawn in hand in case I need it to block any checks. Now if he grabs the bishop on g4, I am keeping an eye on the f3 square, so at any moment if I drop on d2, he can't take it back with the queen because of knight at f3 check. I'm not entirely sure whether dropping on d2 here is correct. I mean, there's also tempting moves like bishop to b4. Having another knight in hand will also be very useful. I decide to drop there. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where this is going. Bishop at c4 is no good because it'll just stick a pawn on d3. Knight at d4. Now this looks optically really strong for black because it seems though his king has to walk into a double check and discover check. But knight at f3 doesn't really go anywhere after king to e2. King to e3 maybe also possible. And what else? Knight b3 check. Okay, I can pick up the rook. But the rook is not really the piece I want in hand. I'd rather knights and pawns. So knight takes rook is not that much of a worry for white in this position. Trading queens doesn't get anywhere. So I actually think white might even stand a little better here. Even though his king is being harassed, he can never take the bishop on d2. Because he's got a lot of pieces in hand and I'm running out. And even if I take the rook on a1, it's not really doing anything. So you can play, for instance, bishop to a4, bishop at a4 check. So I decided to take the knight on c3 because the knight is very useful in hand. But now it looks like I have to block with a pawn. I don't want to use up a knight just as a defensive piece. That's a bit of a waste. So pawn to c6, expecting pawn at d7 check. Yeah, I was kind of hoping for queen takes, rook takes, knight at c7, king to d7, because then he's running out of checks. And in this case, okay, I got the knight checks covered. He does have queen at d5, but I thought I would be okay after bishop d6. Yeah, I know he's got this, but pawn at e7. And because the pawn and bishop are always going to be defending each other, I felt reasonably safe. So I'm expecting a pawn drop on e6. I'm intending king back to d8. You can see I'm pointing here at the square d8, and I thought, yeah, the king will be safe. Okay, you can drop a pawn on c7, but then king takes. You'll have to sack a knight to make progress, but I think it's just not enough. And I'm going to start checking very soon. So I'm trying to look for a forced sequence here. Do I drop the queen on d2? Yeah, and I want to stop him running back to g2, so I've got to find the best way to do that. It is knight at h4. That's the move that forces the king out. And then using the other knight on board, yeah, to finish off. So it was a nice mate in 3, starting at queen at d2 check. Okay, that's 4 games done. On to game 5. We've got an early d5, pawn sack. I decided not to allow his quick development, so we get a sort of Caro-Kann position here, exchange Caro-Kann. He's got to watch out for the sensitive square c7, of course. So at any moment I can throw in bishop b5, and then it seems to force him to play pawn back at c7, because the obvious threat is bishop takes knight check. So yeah, I'm pointing at the square b5, intending to take on c6 next turn. Other idea is to drop a pawn on a6 and then undermine the defense on the knight. Okay, there's another risky move, knight to e5, which also may be good, because if I can take on c6, take again, he's running out of blockers on d7. But I thought there's also plenty of good options here. Pawn at b7, pawn at c7, knight at c7. And he's a long way from threatening my king. I mean, even if he takes on f3, he takes on g2, I'm not too worried about this, because it takes a few moves to really get anything going. Alright, so my biggest threat, yeah, I'm pointing at c7, because my biggest threat here is actually knight at c7, followed by b takes a8 equals queen. And that will win a stack of material, and it will take him three moves to get anywhere. So he starts with pawn takes f3, but yeah, I think my attack's just going to be way too fast here. So knight at c7, he's probably just going to take it, promote to queen check. He'll block somewhere, or yeah, I can pretty much pre-move bishop takes queen. I'm not really anticipating a queen block. Alright, so threatening queen at c8. Yeah, it's just too much. I have too many queens. Okay, 5-0. Pretty happy so far. Game 2 is a bit shaky, but yeah, it's pretty smooth from there on. Okay, black a third time. e4, e5. We get a first, you could say, mainstream opening. I'll go for 4 knights. Yeah, bishop to e7. I'm pretty happy if I can get away with castling. So he does the sack. Knight d4. Knight takes pawn. King to f8. King g8. Maybe possible there too. Alright, so I'm actually unfamiliar with this move order, because most people sack on move 4 rather than move 5. But okay, bishop at h5 of course makes some sense, especially if it forces pawn to f3. Okay, and now my knight on d4 is trapped, but there's a few good options to sack a piece and progress forwards. I'm looking at getting in the move bishop to h4 check, and hopefully enticing g3, where there's some weaknesses to target on g2 and f2. So I don't want to sack the knight on d4 because that's the knight I want to keep on board. So I'm going to sack the other one. Alright, so intending bishop to h4 check next turn. You can't really stop that. I guess he could castle, but that's not really in his favour. I'll trade knights on c3. Alright, just expecting pawn takes knight. Oh, sorry, knight takes knight. Oh no, knight takes knight, pawn e2. So, yeah, all the trades seem to be in black's favour here. King f1. What happens? I can trade on c3, then drop a knight on f2. Alright, maybe he was expecting pawn at f2 check, where king f1 looks reasonably safe, but yeah, this move is a rude shock. So bishop takes g3 check is my next move. And already it's very difficult for white to play. Maybe king e2 is the best move here. I don't know, but that's a bit sad. So rook g1, bishop takes g3 check. I mean he can't block it. He's got to take. King e2. F1 queen is the other option, but I decided to take the rook. The point of f1 queen is he can't really take it back with a queen. There's a knight takes g3 check coming. So I don't really want to keep that precious baby on g2. I want to keep her alive, so trying to find the best sequence to keep that pawn on g2 alive. I mean, rook at h1 really doesn't get anywhere. Rook at f1 doesn't get anywhere. So take on g3 with check. Now, of course, when you can set up a queen factory, it's important to grab as many pawns as you can. King d3. All right, this is certainly brave. I really don't see an obvious mating net here that I can set up, so I've also got to consider, what is my opponent's next move in this position, because he could suddenly spring a counterattack. He's got a few pieces in hand, and I've got to watch out for this queen coming to g2, g3, controlling the g-file, pawn at h6, stuff like this. So I decided to open the bishop. Now the bishop's always going to guard a fork on e6. I'm trying to grab a knight in hand for f4. So knight at f4 will be very useful to stop queen takes g2. So he's got the triple d pawns, king in the middle. He's got some undeveloped pieces on a1, c1. And the knight on e5 seems to be a bit stuck. It doesn't want to go to c4 because that blocks off his king's journey all the way to b3 and a2. So it's getting a bit hard for white to find a move. Maybe queen takes g2, but yeah, it seems like pawn takes knight is a good response. Okay, so he's got to come up with something here. Pawn at h6. He's making me decide what to do. Do I defend g7? Do I play rook g8? Do I take the pawn and open the g-file? Do I defend queen f6? But then that allows knight at d7. So okay, I'll allow pawn takes check. King takes. So knight at f4 is a possibility. Next move. It's a little bit hard to cover all these squares c4, b3 at the moment. I need a few more pawns in hand. Looking at bishop f5 check, but dropping on e4 doesn't seem to get anywhere. And I do need that bishop to cover knight at e6 check. Looking at rook at f1, but no, then I realized, what's my opponent's next move? It's going to be bishop at f6 check. So looking at ways to cover the square f6. I don't really want to move the queen away because then, of course, bishop at f6 comes with tempo. King g8, knight at h6. Okay, I have to avoid this. So I want to play a move to guard the square again on f6. Even a move like pawn at e7 seems reasonable. But I've decided to do it with development. And I'm actually tempting him after rook f8 to drop a pawn on f6 because that pawn will be very useful in my attack. yeah, I mean, what else is he going to do? He could start preparing an escape avenue, maybe. Pawn to a4, pawn to a3. But I can sense that he wants to counterattack. Maybe bishop at d4. Alright, so sack the rook. Yeah, I don't mind this because I've got e8 covered. So there's no knight at e8. Got the bishop on h5 covering. There's no rook checks. There's no pawn checks. There's no bishop checks. So yeah, there's some nasty knight checks coming here. Now, I didn't actually realize in the game that I have knight at e5 check, followed by rook at c4. And since he's blocked off the e3 square, that would have been mate in 2. I had this funny idea to put a pawn on e2, and then I realized, yeah, this looks like force mate with knight at b6, because I have so many pawns in hand. I should be able to tempt his king to b4 at some stage, and then play a5. That saves a pawn. And yeah, drop the rook on b4 to finish. So this does look like mate in 2. Pawn at d6, rook at b4. And that is it. So yeah, okay, I could have made a faster mate with knight at e5, but on the whole I was very happy with the way I stopped his counterattack by threatening to go knight at f4 and then yeah, rook f8 and grabbing a couple of extra pawns. Alright, so my opponent has lost 6 games, wants to avoid the adoption, so he says let's stop. So yeah, I'm happy to play a few more games of course, but the rest of the games will be just for fun or for the audience. He's saying he doesn't have a chance, but nah, that's not really true. I mean, game 2 was totally his for the taking. He could have absolutely blown me off the board with some timely sacrifices. So yeah, I mean, this game was close up to a point. There was another game which started, I think knight f3 was at game 4, which is also fairly close up to a point. So yeah, I haven't been that comfortable with my black games so far. I do have to improve with black. But yeah, the white games have been fairly comfortable. Oh yeah, I'm just saying in the chat here, I'm sure he would beat me at 0.5 or 1-0. I need time to think, especially the increment has helped me a lot so far in round 1 and round 2. So it looks like this is it for today, and I've progressed through to round 3. So in round 3, I'm going to play another Dutchie, Clear Cast. I played him a few times in the 24-hour Crazyhouse Revolution tournament. Wasn't at the best of times. So this match today was played at 1 a.m. It started at 1 a.m. It was fairly short, about 35 minutes. And yeah, in the Crazyhouse 24-hour tournament, I started at about midnight. I went for 6.5 hours or so. Finished at 6 or 6:30, and had to get up at 7:30 to play real chess against 2 IMs that day. And that day did not end well for me. I had a really good day the previous day on Saturday. That was Easter Saturday a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, my tournament just completely fell apart after the Crazyhouse. So the chess didn't help the Crazyhouse didn't help the chess. Unfortunately, yeah, I didn't play my best the next day. Alright, so we'll end the video here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in round 3.